Hi, I'm Chef Richard Miller. Welcome to this episode of Chef Richard's Kitchen. Well, it's November. It's probably the first week. It is the first week of November. And when the weather starts getting colder and you're thinking that the snow's going to start flying pretty soon, oh, heaven forbid. But when you do that, what do we usually think of? Chili or some kind of robust soup. And so what I'm going to do today in this episode is we're going to make chili. And this is going to be, if you've ever eaten at BJ's Brewhouse and Restaurant and had their chili, it's delicious. And this is going to be very, very similar to that. And what we're going to do is we're going to start out with about 3 pounds of meat. Now I use about 2 pounds of ground beef to 1 pound of ground pork, and that usually gives it a much better taste. We're going to use a couple cups of water, 15, or in this case this is 30 ounces of tomato puree, 3 cans of pinto beans, 2 cups of onions, a half cup of flour, this is going to thicken it, chili powder, salt, garlic powder, pepper, ground thyme, cayenne flakes, and the thyme and the cayenne flakes are out of my garden, and chili powder. And then, of course, 2 bottles of pale ale. BJ's uses their Piranha Pale Ale. I am just using another brand of pale ale. Sierra Nevada, Bass, they all work very, very well. And finally, we have some cheese, which is a cheddar, Monterey Jack, some sour cream, and onions that we're going to put on at the end for garnish. So let's get started. Let's start first by browning our meat. Now let me wash my hands since I've been touching the meat raw. Now right here I'm using just standard ground pork. But for the ground beef, I'm actually using 85%, 85-15, rather than the normal 80-20. Why? Well, to me, there's not a lot of difference, but my cardiologist would love it if I'd try and cut down on my fat a little bit. It's going to take a while to brown, so I'm going to kind of come in and come out and fade out and not bore you with while I'm sitting here browning this, but just for your own information, yeah, it's going to take a while. Now for your people who like your ground beef or ground pork and ground meat a little bit finer, before you put in the onions, let me suggest you take a potato masher to it. And here's my year 1 potato masher, and the reason I call that is I think it was either my grandmother's, or I think it was more my great-grandmother's potato masher, and just mash it along. Now, I kind of like things a little bit chunkier, so I'm not going to use it. But if you want things very, very fine, like if you were making a Cincinnati chili or something like that, use potato masher. Here we have our meat and our onions are pretty much the way we want them. Now it's time to add the thickener. Why do we add it now instead of after we have the chili finished? Well, the reason is if we add it now, the flour is going to incorporate better without all that liquid. It's not going to clump, and it's also going to give it time that it'll cook that flour, flavor out of it. So let's go ahead and now let's put in our flour. All right, and as you can see now here, you can tell that the mixture looks a whole lot different now than it did from before we put in our thickener. But you'll also notice that there's no clumping. All right, and if you put this in after everything and all your liquid is in, you're almost always going to have clumping in there, and it's going to look like, well, you're going to look like an amateur. So go ahead and put it in now. Now it's time we're going to put in some more other ingredients. So we're going to put in our 2 cups of water. We're going to put in our tomato puree, or if you want to use crushed tomatoes, that's very good too. I've used both, and to be real honest, I can't tell a lot of difference. Let's stir this up. There, now we have everything pretty well incorporated in here. Now it's time to add the spices. All right, let's go ahead and we're going to add 1.5 teaspoons of garlic powder. We're going to add about 1 teaspoon of black pepper, and about a short tablespoon of salt. Now, I've said before on these episodes, I'd rather put in less salt than more. And the reason is I want to get it to a point where it's tasty. But at the same time, I don't want to put too much in there to satisfy those people that really like salt, and that's going to cause people with low sodium diets, to have problems. So I want it to be flavored enough that if you take it the way it is, it's very flavorful, but it's not overly salty either. There's always a salt shaker on the table for those that want a little extra. And there's about a teaspoon and a half of thyme. Now the thyme, and as we get to the red pepper flakes, are both out of my garden. I grow them. I've got a food dehydrator that's in with my air fryer, so I just go ahead and I dry them, and then usually run them through a spice grinder, or if you've got a coffee bean grinder, that works too. All right. Now that we've got those in there, now it's time for about 3 tablespoons of mild chili powder. All right, as you can see, it's probably a little bit rounded on there, but I like a little extra chili powder. I like a little extra flavor in there. All right. You see how this is nice and thickened up? It's almost too thick to enjoy as chili, but remember, now it's time to add our pale ale. So let's go ahead and add a couple of bottles of our pale ale. And just for the sake of it, I've tried it with India Pale Ale, and to be real honest, I like it with just a regular pale ale much, much better. So now what we're going to do is there's an awful lot of water in the pale ale. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to let it boil down for a little bit. That'll get rid of the alcohol and water in here. So yes, the kids can enjoy it as well. In fact, anybody that likes or anybody that has to have non-alcoholic food, trust me, the alcohol will long be boiled out of here. So let's go ahead and let this boil a little bit, and then we'll come back and we'll finish it off. Okay, now that we've gone ahead and we've added our beer, and we've gone ahead and let it cook down for a while. This is why even people that can't have alcohol can have this, because we boiled the alcohol out, because alcohol basically boils and evaporates at such a low temperature. Now, remember the first thing I taught you when it comes to cooking for guests. A, know your guests and know what they can and cannot eat. And number 2, taste it. If you wouldn't eat it, don't serve it to them. In this case, I'd certainly eat it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add some cayenne pepper flakes. And these are just cayenne peppers that I grew, dried them out in the dehydrator, and then ran them through the meat grinder in my KitchenAid. You don't want to add much, but you want to add a little. All right, now it's time to add the beans. And the beans we're going to be using here are just plain pinto beans. What brand you use means nothing. All right. Go ahead and add your pinto beans. We've added our cayenne peppers. We've added everything. We've added all our ingredients. At this point here, our chili is done. But I don't want to serve it right away, and the reason I don't is because I want to let the flavors meld in a little bit. So I'm going to turn the heat down, and I'm going to let it simmer for a while. Then we're going to go ahead and dish it up and serve it. All right, let's go ahead and let's put our cover on, and let's just go ahead and let it simmer for a while. Okay, it's been about an hour and a half, and that's probably about the time you should let this simmer so that the flavors meld together. So let's go ahead and give it a try. All right, here we have our finished product. Now, you can offer your guests oyster crackers. The cheese, I use the Mexican blend, which is basically cheddar, Monterey Jack, some sour cream, and some chopped green onions. And I always go ahead and throw the little shaker of pepper flakes on there, just to let them have their choice. Right? In this case, I'm going to throw on a little bit of cheese, a few green onions, a little bit of sour cream, and let's give it a try. That's good. You'll be able to serve this to anybody, any guest that you want, and you'll get raves over it. So, in the meantime, before we meet again, remember, take care, God bless, good luck to you, and remember the first rule that I always give you: cooking should be fun. See you next episode.